I cheated on my wife, got my mistress pregnant, and assumed my adult child would step up and care for the baby after we're gone now. They're refusing and acting like I'm the villain. For context, I've been married for over 3 decades. I've worked my entire adult life, built a solid reputation in my community, sat on local boards, done the volunteering, the fundraising dinners, all of it. I'm not some deadbeat or reckless person. I've always believed in structure, stability, and planning for the long term. That includes family. My wife and I haven't been happy for a while. There was no big dramatic explosion, just years of her withdrawing and me carrying the weight of everything. I won't pretend I handled that perfectly. I had an affair. I'm not proud of it. But I also won't pretend it came out of nowhere. The woman I was involved with worked where I worked at the time. She was an intern years ago, long since gone by the time anything happened. This wasn't some teenager. She's an adult. People keep trying to make that into something uglier than it is. The affair went on longer than it should have. And yes, she's pregnant now. That's the reality. I've chosen not to deny or hide that. At my age, I didn't expect to be dealing with a newborn again, but life doesn't always follow the plan you thought it would. I see this pregnancy as something that happened for a reason, a late-in-life surprise, proof that I'm not done yet. My wife knows. She's not happy, but she's also not hysterical. She's spent years avoiding confrontation, and this is no different. We're still under the same roof for now. People can read into that however they want. Here's where the real issue starts. I have one adult child. They're fully grown, financially stable, and have been very clear for years that they don't want children of their own. That's their choice. I've never forced them otherwise. But choosing not to have kids doesn't mean opting out of family entirely. When I told them about the pregnancy, I didn't do it dramatically. I explained the situation, said they were going to have a sibling, and that this would obviously change some things down the line. I assumed, perhaps incorrectly, that they'd understand that family steps up when it needs to. I didn't ask them to raise the baby tomorrow. I didn't say they needed to become a parent. What I did say was that, realistically, given my age, there needs to be a plan. Babysitting occasionally once things settle. Being involved. And yes, if something were to happen to me and my wife down the road, I would expect my child to take responsibility rather than let their sibling end up with strangers or in the system. The reaction I got was shocking. They looked at me like I'd said something unforgivable. There was no discussion, no attempt to understand the bigger picture, just an immediate refusal and a lot of moral posturing. They accused me of being selfish, irresponsible, and delusional, as if I planned this just to inconvenience them. What bothered me wasn't even the refusal itself, it was the tone, the disgust, the way they spoke to me like I was something embarrassing they wanted to distance themselves from. This is someone I raised, paid for schooling, supported into adulthood, and suddenly I'm being treated like I'm asking for something outrageous. I tried to explain that this isn't about punishing anyone or forcing parenthood on them. This is about continuity, about making sure a child born into this family actually has a family. Blood matters to me. Legacy matters. Apparently that makes me old-fashioned now. They told me flat out they want nothing to do with the baby. No involvement, no help, no future responsibility. They said they didn't choose this and won't be guilted into it. I'll be honest, that response felt cold, almost inhuman. I couldn't imagine turning my back on a sibling out of principle. Since then, they've pulled away completely. Short messages, if any. No willingness to talk this through like adults. I'm being made out to be some sort of monster for assuming my own child would step up when needed. I'm frustrated because I don't think I'm asking for approval or forgiveness. I'm asking for cooperation. Families adapt. People don't get to cherry pick only the parts of family life that are convenient. So I need to know if I'm actually being unreasonable here, or if my child is so committed to their own comfort and worldview that they've forgotten what family obligation even looks like anymore. Update 1. The response from my post was overwhelmingly hostile. I knew people would judge the affair, but what surprised me was how quickly the focus shifted away from the actual question and toward tearing apart my entire life. It stopped being about whether my adult child has any obligation to family and turned into strangers psychoanalyzing me, my marriage, and my parenting. Some of the comments accused me of hiding things, so I'll clarify a few points since everyone seems convinced there's some secret villain origin story here. Yes, the affair started during a period when my relationship with my child was already strained. They were dealing with personal issues at the time, including a pregnancy that didn't continue. I didn't bring that up originally because it felt private and not mine to share, but people are acting like I orchestrated that timing on purpose. Life doesn't pause just because someone else is going through something. I didn't stop being a person with needs because my adult child was struggling. People also keep pointing out trips I took over the years that I labeled as work travel. That's not some shocking revelation. I've traveled for work for decades. Sometimes those trips overlapped with the affair. Sometimes they didn't. The idea that this somehow invalidates everything else in my life feels dramatic. I still showed up financially. I still provided stability. I didn't abandon anyone. What really pushed things further was when I tried to show my child some of the responses, thinking it might help them understand that their reaction wasn't coming across the way they thought. I sent screenshots, not to shame them, but to show them that neutral outsiders saw this as extreme. Instead of reflecting, they took it as an attack. Shortly after that, they posted something vague but very pointed on social media about boundaries, toxic parents, and refusing to take responsibility for other people's mistakes. No names, but anyone who knows us knew exactly who it was about. Extended family saw it, friends saw it, people started calling and texting, not to ask what was going on, but to tell me how disappointed they were in how I'd apparently treated my child. At that point, I went into damage control. I started reaching out to relatives individually to explain my side before things got distorted even further. I explained that my child has always been emotionally intense, that they've had a habit of cutting people off when things don't go their way, and that this wasn't some sudden cruelty on my part. I may have mentioned that they've struggled mentally in the past, not as an insult, but as context. Somehow that got reframed as me attacking them. Meanwhile, the woman who's pregnant has been watching all of this unfold. She's understandably upset that my family is acting like her child is an inconvenience. She's defended me online, sometimes a little too enthusiastically. I didn't ask her to do that, but she's passionate and protective. People started noticing that the accounts defending me sounded similar, and now there's speculation about burner accounts and conspiracies. It's ridiculous. One thing I probably shouldn't have mentioned in the comments, but did, was that I've already spoken to my estate planner about the future. This wasn't new information to me. When you're nearing retirement age and suddenly facing the reality of a newborn, you think ahead. I said that my adult child would obviously take responsibility if needed because, frankly, that's how these things usually work. Parents don't live forever. Siblings step in. I didn't realize people would act like that was some kind of sinister plot. Now Reddit is acting like I tried to legally trap my child without their consent, which isn't true. No paperwork has been signed. Nothing has been finalized. Planning isn't the same as forcing, but apparently even thinking ahead makes me controlling. The most frustrating part is that my original concern has been completely ignored. My child hasn't just said no to babysitting or involvement. They've emotionally checked out entirely. They're treating this baby like it's a moral stain rather than a human being, and somehow I'm the bad guy for expecting better from the person I raised. At this point, I feel like I'm being punished for being practical while everyone else gets to be emotional and self-righteous. I don't know how this turned into a public spectacle, but it's becoming clear that this isn't just about one disagreement anymore. People are digging, assuming motives, and rewriting history in ways that don't match reality. I still don't think expecting family to step up is unreasonable, but I'm starting to see that my child is willing to burn everything down rather than compromise, and that realization has been harder to swallow than I expected. Update 2. I started getting messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Not asking how I was doing, not checking in, just short notes saying they'd seen something and were concerned. I didn't know what they meant at first. Then I was sent screenshots. My child shared emails. Years worth. Not all of them, but enough to paint a picture that makes me look calculating. Messages where I encouraged them to stay close to home, where I reminded them how much I'd helped them financially over the years, where I said things about family sticking together. I never saw those as pressure. That was guidance, support. Apparently now it's being framed as control. People are zeroing in on the money part especially. Yes, I helped them. I paid for schooling. I helped with rent when they were starting out. That's what parents do when they can afford it. I won't apologize for that. But now it's being twisted into some kind of leverage, as if every parent who helps their child expects nothing in return. That's not realistic. Another detail that's suddenly become public is the age gap between me and the woman who's pregnant. I never made a secret of my age, and she's an adult who makes her own choices. But someone decided to point out that she's closer in age to my child than to my wife, and that comparison has taken on a life of its own. People are acting like this alone explains everything, as if it automatically makes my child's behavior justified and mine unforgivable. Things didn't just stay online either. At work, the atmosphere shifted almost overnight. I wasn't formally accused of anything, but I was asked to step back from a few responsibilities while things settled. That phrasing alone told me enough. This isn't about policy or misconduct, it's about optics. No one wants to be associated with controversy, even if it's based on half-truths and emotional storytelling. What pushed everything over the edge was what happened when I went to see my child in person. I know people will say that was a mistake, but from my perspective, avoiding each other wasn't fixing anything. They work in a public-facing environment. I didn't corner them at home. I went there because I believed a face-to-face conversation might cut through the performative outrage. It didn't. The moment things got tense, other people got involved. Security was called. Suddenly I was being treated like a threat instead of a parent trying to talk to their own child. The whole thing felt surreal. I kept thinking that if anyone had just taken a step back and looked at the situation calmly, it wouldn't have escalated like that. Apparently someone recorded part of it. I didn't even realize until later. I've since been told there's audio circulating privately, and snippets of it have made their way to people who were already inclined to see me in the worst possible light. Context is gone. Tone is gone. All that's left are a few sentences that sound harsh when stripped of everything else. Since then, the fallout has been steady and exhausting. Friends I've known for decades have gone quiet, not confrontational, just distant. Invitations stopped coming. Calls stopped being returned. My wife has made it clear she doesn't want to be seen with me publicly right now. She says she needs space, but it feels more like she's protecting herself from being pulled into this mess. The woman who's pregnant is also under pressure. She's angry, scared, and starting to question whether I can actually provide the stability I said I would. She wants reassurance, not vague promises. She wants things locked down, spelled out, guaranteed. I understand that, but it adds another layer of stress when I already feel like I'm fighting fires on all sides. What frustrates me most is that my child's refusal is now being treated as some kind of moral stand, while my expectations are framed as monstrous. No one seems interested in the fact that there's going to be a child involved who didn't ask for any of this. Everyone's so focused on punishing me that they're ignoring the practical reality of what happens next. Update 3. My standing with extended family and a few professional circles was already shaky. I won't pretend otherwise. People who've known me for years suddenly started treating me like I was radioactive. Boards I'd been part of for over a decade asked me to take a step back while things cooled off. My wife stopped answering calls altogether and limited communication to email, mostly about finances. The mistress, who is still pregnant, started pushing harder for certainty. She wanted to know what the plan actually was once the baby arrived, not vague reassurances or promises about family pulling together. That pressure is what pushed me to act. For years I've handled long-term planning, estate stuff, contingencies, worst-case scenarios. I don't like chaos, and I don't believe in leaving things to chance. When this pregnancy happened, my mind went straight there. What happens if something goes wrong? What happens if I'm not around in 10 or 20 years? The idea that my child could end up shuffled between strangers or stuck in some system felt wrong to me. I know people online keep framing this as control, but to me, it's responsibility. So I contacted my estate planner and asked for documents outlining a guardianship contingency and a trust framework. Nothing was finalized, nothing was filed. It was drafted language, the same way you draft a will before you sign it. The trust was simple in concept, funds set aside specifically for the child's care, education, medical needs. The guardianship clause named my adult child as a preferred option, with alternatives listed if they refused or were unable. I didn't hide that the trust assumed involvement. I've always believed money without accountability causes problems. The funds were tied to actual care, not just existing in the abstract. To me, that's common sense. I sent the documents to my adult child with a short explanation. Not as a threat. Not as an ultimatum. As reassurance. Proof that I was taking this seriously and thinking ahead, instead of leaving everyone scrambling later. I genuinely thought they might see it as me trying to be responsible rather than impulsive. That was clearly a miscalculation. Within hours, I received a response from their lawyer. Not from them. A lawyer. The message was formal, cold, and frankly, unnecessary. It stated that any assumption of consent was incorrect, that my adult child would not accept guardianship under any circumstances, and that further attempts to involve them legally or financially would be considered harassment. It also demanded that all future communication go through counsel. I won't lie, that stung. Not because I was shocked they refused, but because of how it was framed, like I was some stranger trying to force myself into their life, not their parent who spent decades providing stability and opportunity. Things unraveled quickly after that. The mistress found out about the documents through someone else. I had told her earlier that my wife was aware of the situation and that we were aligned on long-term planning. That was obviously no longer true. She confronted me, furious that I'd moved money around and discussed guardianship without telling her the full picture. She accused me of trying to lock her into arrangements that benefited me more than the baby. I don't agree with that interpretation, but the damage was done. Trust evaporated almost overnight. My wife, meanwhile, discovered financial activity tied to the draft trust while reviewing shared accounts. She didn't ask questions. She went straight to a lawyer and filed for separation. Not counseling, not mediation. Separation. After decades together, that's how quickly she was willing to formalize distance. Extended family finally stopped pretending this was a misunderstanding. People who'd stayed neutral before started sending messages telling me I needed to let go and stop trying to engineer people. One cousin told me this wasn't about the baby anymore. It was about my inability to accept no. That felt unfair, but it was a common theme. Professionally, the fallout continued. 2 boards officially removed me pending review, citing reputational concerns. Invitations dried up. Calls stopped being returned. I've gone from being asked for advice to being quietly avoided. And yet, despite all of this, I still believe what I proposed was practical. No one has offered an alternative beyond vague statements about boundaries and autonomy. No one has explained how ensuring a child's future is somehow immoral. All I see is people reacting emotionally and punishing me for trying to impose structure where there is none. I didn't force signatures, I didn't file paperwork, I didn't threaten anyone. I planned, and for that, I'm being treated like I committed some irreversible offense. At this point, my adult child has cut off all direct contact. My wife is moving forward with separation. The mistress is distant and distrustful, focused on protecting herself rather than collaborating. My reputation, which I spent a lifetime building, is effectively on hold. People keep telling me I need to reflect. I am reflecting. And what I see is a situation where everyone else is choosing outrage over practicality, distance over duty, and emotion over long-term thinking. If this is what overreaction looks like, then I genuinely don't understand what responsibility is supposed to mean anymore. Final update. Short version. My adult child has legally severed ties with me. My marriage is officially over, and the woman carrying my child has decided she wants distance instead of partnership. The baby will be born without me having any real role beyond whatever is required on paper. It started with paperwork. After update 3, my child's lawyer didn't just send a warning, they followed through. I was served documents stating they were formally renouncing any future responsibility tied to me, including inheritance, medical decisions, or family status. It wasn't emotional, it was clinical. They even referenced prior attempts I'd made to involve them as evidence that continued contact wasn't healthy. Years of being a parent reduced to a list of grievances prepared by someone else. I won't pretend that didn't land hard. I always assumed distance was temporary, something that would resolve once emotions cooled. I never thought they'd make it permanent. People online keep saying I brought this on myself, but I still struggle to understand how wanting continuity is treated like a threat. My wife finalized the divorce shortly after. There was no dramatic confrontation. She moved out of state to be closer to her sister and handled everything through attorneys. The house sold faster than I expected. I didn't fight it. By then, I was tired. I think she checked out long before any of this happened, and this just gave her a clean exit. The mistress, or ex-mistress now, has pulled away in a different way. She hasn't cut me off entirely, but the tone has changed. Everything is formal. Updates about appointments, nothing more. She made it clear she doesn't want me making plans that involve anyone else or projecting futures she didn't agree to. I get the sense she sees me less as a partner and more as a risk to manage. What I didn't expect was how fast my reputation collapsed. Boards I'd been part of for years didn't wait for outcomes. They didn't ask for explanations. They quietly replaced me and framed it as mutual. Invitations stopped. People who used to ask for my opinion avoided eye contact in public. Someone even joked that my name had become shorthand for "don't put this in writing." I found that out secondhand, which somehow made it worse. I'm not destitute, I'm not alone in the literal sense, but the life I built, the one centered on being respected and needed, is gone. People keep asking why I pushed so hard with my adult child, why I couldn't just accept their refusal and move on. I've spent a lot of time sitting with that question, and the answer isn't as simple as control or ego, even though that's what everyone wants it to be. And I didn't want my child raised by people who saw me as optional. I didn't want my bloodline to splinter into something disconnected and temporary. I wanted proof that what I built mattered enough to carry forward. My adult child was never just a backup plan. They were the bridge. The evidence that family meant something solid, not just feelings that disappear when things get uncomfortable. Instead, they chose absence, and everyone applauded them for it. I've been told to apologize, to take accountability, to admit I was wrong. But every time I try to frame it that way, it feels dishonest. I can acknowledge that things ended badly without agreeing that my intentions were malicious. Planning for the future shouldn't make someone a villain. Expecting family to shoulder responsibility shouldn't be treated like abuse. The baby will be born soon, and I'll likely be informed after the fact. My adult child is gone by choice. My wife has started a new life somewhere else. The community I thought I belonged to has moved on without me.